All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Sales Story and a Tip podcast. Of course, the Sales Story and a Tip podcast is a part of the Sales Game Changers podcast family. My name is Fred Diamond. I'm the co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales, and I'm also the host and the producer of the Sales Game Changers podcast, including Sales Story and a Tip. Mike Malloy, this podcast is available on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to today's show on Apple Podcasts, please go up, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Give us a like, ask a question, leave a comment, subscribe to the show as well. We would appreciate that. Mike, we've been transcribing every Sales Story and a Tip podcast. So if you go to salesgamechangerspodcast.com, today go to salesgamechangerspodcast.com/Mike Malloy. You could read the complete transcription. All right, Sales Story and a Tip. It's very simple. I introduce the speaker, ask them to say a little bit of a brief introduction. Then I say, Mike Malloy, tell us a great sales story. And then I'll say, Mike, give us a tip that you learned from the story. All right, Mike, they've heard me say your name a bunch of times. Introduce yourself. We got Mike Malloy with Malloy Industries. Give us a little bit of an intro.
Hi, I'm Mike. I have previous experience as a Deloitte consultant, a traveling sunglasses salesman and CEO, incubator program director at Halcyon, and an adjunct professor at Georgetown. And I'm passionate about being a relentlessly generous and enthusiastically fun force for good in the world through help entrepreneurs buy back their freedom and time to focus on what matters most, both professionally and personally. And, I started Malloy Industries a little over 3 years ago, coming out of COVID and the Great Resignation era. And, I'm now the CEO here at Malloy Industries, which creates more time and freedom for CEOs by helping them take off their undesirable hats and give them to vetted fractional executives. And so CEOs who want to scale their B2B sales from 1 or 2 million to 10 to 20 million in annual revenue benefit the most from the Malloy match with a trustworthy fractional sales executive.
All right. So the Great Resignation, that's oldie but goldie. It was only 2 years ago. Again, we're doing today's interview in the summer of 2024. Mike Malloy, tell us a great sales story.
So we are in the summer of 2024, and this story goes back to the very first sales meeting I had of the year. On January 3rd, I met with a CEO named Catherine, and she had reached out to me over the holidays saying, hey, Mike, I need some help. Can we meet as soon as possible? I was like, well, New Year's Eve, all right, first meeting of the year, let's get it on the calendar. And we went into that meeting for a sales scalability assessment. So I could kind of dive into her business, understand where she was, where she needed to go. And her goal was to 3x her revenue this year. And she knew what got her here wasn't going to get her there. And that her marketing materials were kind of a mess. Her sales decks needed to be tightened up. And she honestly wasn't sure what to say when in sales meetings, and she didn't have a sales background at all. She was a product person, very passionate about the B2B solution she'd built, but she really needed a wingman or a co-pilot to build out the sales strategy, systems, and processes, and kind of put some more arrows in her quiver to go out and market and ultimately sell her solution in the K-12 education space. And so she was self-aware enough to identify that marketing was the piece of the business she hated. She doesn't know what to write in drip email campaigns. She's not into fluffy content creation. And when she stares at a blank Google Doc trying to write them, was kind of hitting a wall. And so she self-described it as a unicorn would be somebody who has both sales and marketing expertise and can kind of be in the trenches with me. She recognized that there's a big difference between, hey, let me call Mike Malloy for 30 minutes of advice once a month, versus a fractional executive co-working on Zoom, building out these things, ripping them apart, rebuilding them together so that they're much better. And when we went into kind of that first call at the beginning of January, I asked her to reflect on it later. And, she was very impressed with how attentive I was to her needs, both professionally and personally. And she also didn't go all in and saying, hey, I definitely want Malloy Industries. And, she also did her own research, posted on LinkedIn to see if she could find somebody else. And, she's like, I got, 30 candidates, but most of them were trash and nobody compared to the caliber of the 3 vetted fractional sales executives from Malloy Industries. So coming out of that initial assessment, I introduced her to Michael, William, and Keith so that she could then schedule interviews with them, get to understand their personality a little bit more, because what we found in fractional sales matchmaking is that they're going to have the skills. I'm not going to bring trash candidates to you, but so much depends on interpersonal communication and the culture of how does the CEO like to communicate? How do the fractional sales executives show up both when they're interacting, working one-on-one with the CEO, as well as externally facing when they're talking to future customers and existing customers out in the marketplace. And so we knew after that assessment that like she needed to formalize the sales process to have higher win rates, to have more future customers in the top of the pipeline. And she really needed this fractional senior level chief revenue officer as the next addition to her team in Q1 to Q2 with hopes of building out a larger sales team in 2025. And so as she interviewed with those 3 fractional executives, I didn't just kind of sit back on the sidelines and be like, oh, I'll talk to you, in a couple of weeks. I continued to help and add value. And I shared some resources, about like, what is a fractional executive? How to work with a fractional sales executive. We have a treasure trove of, we call them valuable trust building gifts. Somebody else might call them a lead magnet, but they're things that can help you build out the pieces of your sales funnel, the activities, some Mad Libs, if you will, to fill in some scripts. So I sprinkled those in, and even before that first sales meeting of the year, I had helped Catherine over the past 2 years at various times reviewing her pitch deck, making introductions to potential investors, recommending her for Camelback, a fellowship for entrepreneurs. And so we had an existing relationship there where we knew each other. She liked me, trusted me, and was able to benefit from kind of that generosity where I wasn't selling anything on the front end. And one of our core values is to be relentlessly generous and to figure out, hey, how can we help these entrepreneurs in as many ways as possible? So it becomes a no-brainer to work with us when the time is right. And so after a couple of weeks, she was able to interview these 3. She ultimately picked Michael at the end of January. They started in February. And she has reflected back saying, like, Michael was the exact person that I needed because he's both a strategist who knew what he's doing and could say, hey, we should be doing X, Y, and Z. And he's also a doer. He's not just sitting up in his ivory tower spewing strategy, but actually rolling up his sleeves, writing the scripts. At the point now where there isn't a single marketing or sales piece of collateral in the company that he hasn't touched and iterated and improved on. He also helped coach her on some of the things that she could delegate to other team members, so that she could focus more on being the CEO, leading the company. And what's amazing to come out of this is I've now been to a few in-person events with Catherine. There's an Agora Initiative event in DC. We just went to DC Startup Week happy hour a couple weeks ago. And at all of those events, we're both referring things to each other. She is one of our biggest advocates and promoters and identifies other CEOs of B2B SaaS companies saying, oh, like, but sales, talk to Malloy. Like, he's over there. Let me introduce you. He's that guy in the Hawaiian shirt, or he's got crabs on. I'm trying to wear a little something to stand out there. And I've been able to help connect her with potential customers as well as investors and do some back channel communications to help her raise some money and really be successful. And, it has been a lot of fun seeing her business grow while also benefiting from the goodwill that she has towards us and wanting to make connections and even connecting us with other fractional executives to add to our roster as a result of the relentless generosity we've shown to her.
Well, that's great. So give us a tip that you learned from that story.
So my tip is to be relentlessly generous, is to be a giver and to find ways to add value and add value and add value and add value and not keep score and be like, hey, I've helped you 3 times. You should buy this thing from me now, but just keep helping them. I love asking people, what's the most expensive problem you're trying to solve right now? And then, hey, do I have a resource or a person or somebody else or something else that I can do to help you solve it? Great. Let me help you. When the time is right, we have fractional executives, but not approaching every relationship as a transactional sales relationship, but as a, how can I add value, make deposits in the relationship bank by being relentlessly generous? Because I want to quote Zig Ziglar here. If you help enough other people get whatever they want in life, you can have anything you want in life.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, I have 2 quick thoughts on that. One is I had a woman that was she was a training sales professional. So her company did IT related training, and we did some networking together, and we got along really well. But she never gave me a lead. And for people who may not know this, at one time, I was a fractional CMO, and if you, of course, help people find fractional chief revenue officers and chief sales officers, VPs of sales. I was a fractional CMO before the word fractional was a cool word, as you and I talked about before.
Yeah.
But I had this person and we did networking together. And I know she came across technology companies that might need a temporary or outsourced CMO and never gave me a lead. And about 7 years into the relationship, I just said, you know what? And I did a lot of things for her and she did things for me. 7 years into the relationship, I said, you know what? That we're friends. We're friends. She's never going to bring me a lead. I brought her a couple, but it just things appeared on my radar screen. 10 years into the relationship, she called me one day and said, do you do this as an outsourced CMO or as a fractional CMO? And
Yeah.
basically, she had come across a company that was looking to do some market sizing about looking into various places they wanted to move into. And they needed a competitive analysis, competitive review. And I said, yeah, I've done that before. She goes, well, let me introduce you to this company, which she did. And it led to a 6-figure deal. And it was great. And it was
Yeah.
my big deal of the year. And I remember thinking at one point, to be honest with you, I kind of discarded her. I was like, you know what? She's in this group. I'm nice to her. She hasn't brought me anything. And one day I just said, I'm just going to drop it. You know,
Yeah.
this is a friend. But then it led 3 years later to, one of my biggest deals at the time.
And what I heard from that, Fred, too, is like you have to plant seeds in the spring to harvest in the fall. And sometimes the fall is like 10 years later. And you
Yes.
never know which of all of those seeds, because I'll throw a bonus tip here of like go to one networking event a week, get 3 new business cards. That's 150 people in a year. 10% of them are going to have a massive impact in your career. You just don't know which 10% it is. So if you approach each relationship with relentless generosity, put deposits in the relationship bank, find ways to help and add value, good things happen. You just can't
Yeah.
predict exactly where they're going to come from.
No, that's great. I mean, not every company is sitting around looking for a outsourced chief sales officer, and not every company was looking for an outsourced chief marketing officer. And what you offer is something that's very helpful, very specific. It'll help a company get to a certain place. It may last for years. If it's the right person and the right fit. And same thing with me as a chief marketing officer. Not everybody was ready or understood or was looking, but
Yeah.
the like you were just saying, sowing the seeds eventually led to something. All right, once again, this is the Sales Story and a Tip podcast. You can read the complete transcription at salesgamechangerspodcast.com, salesgamechangerspodcast.com/Mike Malloy. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you see that it's already transcribed as well. All right, Mike, thank you so much. Thank you for the great sales story. My name is Fred Diamond.